Our readings today are about the quest for wisdom and what it takes to find wisdom. Sa panahon natin ngayon, masyadong maraming impormasyon. We are flooded with information, especially in the social media. Dati-rate, ang information natin, nakukuha lang natin sa print media and broadcast media like radio and television. Ngayon, halos wala na raw nagbabasa ng dyaryo. Why? Because the sources of information have been multiplied exponentially by digital technology. Kaya, pati mga dyaryo, pwedeng sa Facebook o sa social media mo na lang basahin. Anyone can post anything in the social media and make it viral, go viral. At kapag nag-viral yung pinost mo, it catches the attention of people and it becomes news. Even if it is not true. Yon ang problema natin. Information always goes with a lot of disinformation. Parang hindi na mas ma-distinguish ng mga tao ngayon yung difference between information, misinformation, and disinformation. Well, pag misinformed lang, minsan aksidente pa yon, nagkamali lang. Pero yung deliberate disinformation, abay, talagang kasinungalingan na yan. And this is bound to happen if people do not even bother to ask questions anymore. Kapag hindi na itinatanong ng tao, totoo ba o hindi? Is it really true? Kaya tuloy, ang daming mga pangamba ng mga tao ngayon because of so many things that they see in the social media. Parang pare-pareho ang value. No distinction. But you see, it takes more than information to know the truth. It is not enough to know what people are saying or what people are talking about. Kung gusto mong malaman yung katotohanan, kailangan din ang maging marunong tayo. We need to grow in wisdom. I have a little problem with the Tagalog word marunong or karunungan. Kasi yun din naman ang ginagamit nating salita for knowledge or understanding. Pero iba yung plain understanding sa wisdom eh. And today we're reflecting on that. Pagiging pantas. But then, of course, the problem is, wisdom can develop only if we have the patience and the time to settle down, to really pay attention and listen, and to reflect on the information that we are getting so that we are able to sort them out because they're not all of the same value. Sa Ebanghelyo natin, sa araw na ito, Mark is telling us that Jesus was trying to explain to his disciples kung ano ba talaga ang mission nila while they were traveling, while they were journeying through Galilee on the way to Jerusalem. And Mark tells us they did not understand. Di nila siya maintindihan. Pero none of them dared to ask a question. None of them sought any clarification about what exactly he meant. You know that situation, hindi nila naintindihan, pero walang nagtanong. In fact, Jesus even went out of his way to ask them if anything was the matter. Because napansin niya, they were arguing with one another about something. And when Jesus asked them a question, tumahimik sila. They kept quiet. You know, alam ninyo that I am a teacher, and this scene reminds me of many instances in the past. Noong profesor pa ako sa seminaryo at sa mga schools of theology, syempre, kailangan laging maghanda ng lecture. And minsan magle-lecture ako. At the end of a lecture, I would ask the students if everything was clear. Class, malinaw ba? Any questions? And there would be no questions. And pag ganon, I would usually say, okay, no questions. I suppose, ibig sabihin, malinaw. Then maybe, if you don't have questions, I should ask you some questions. I should ask you some questions. At pag ganun na, medyo namumutla na sila. And the usual question is, how did you understand what I just explained to you now? Anong pag-unawa ninyo sa pinaliwanag ko ngayon lang? And when you cannot get any one of the students to explain or to even summarize coherently what you just discussed for almost 1 hour, it is then that you realize, wala silang naintindihan. And you almost want to bang your head on the table and say to yourself, ay nako, I am a failure. Even the best teacher sometimes experiences that. And I wonder if Jesus did not feel this way in our gospel reading today. Paulit-ulit, nami-misunderstand yung sinasabi niya. Sabi nila, there are 2 things that usually prevent us from understanding things. 1 is the fear of asking questions. And 2, the failure to pay attention. About the first, the fear of asking questions. Ako, tandang-tanda ko pa, noong nagsisimula pa lang akong pumasok sa eskwelahan, laging paalala ng tatay ko, ng yumaong tatay ko, Ambo, tatandaan mo to, kapag may ini-explain si teacher at di mo naintindihan, huwag kang matakot na magtanong. Do not be afraid to ask a question or to seek a clarification. Okay? Palagay ko, nung bata ako, ay na-label ako ng teacher na si mapagtanong because I love to ask questions when I didn't understand. Sabi pa ni tatay, it's okay to admit that you did not understand. Mas mabuti na yon kesa magkunwari na naintindihan mo, gayong hindi mo naman talaga naintindihan. Hindi ka matututo pag nagkunwari ka. One of the biggest blocks to understanding is the hesitancy to ask questions because of the fear of embarrassment. And this fear is reinforced, lalo na kapag yung teacher natitreaten sa questions o pinapahiya ang estudyante dahil nagtatanong. Or kapag ang classmates tinatawanan yung nagtanong. And it is then that the teacher should have the wisdom to admonish the other students not to laugh at questions. Understanding requires a lot of honesty and humility. Honesty and humility to admit your ignorance. Di ba? Parang, it's paradoxical. Parang, you have to admit your ignorance in order to know, to understand, to grow in wisdom. Now, the second most common reason why people are unable to understand: the failure to pay attention. Sabi ni St. Mark sa ating gospel, the disciples were preoccupied pala with something else. Paano sila magkakaintindihan? Iba pala yung takbo ng isip nila while Jesus was explaining things to them. He was struggling to explain things to them. And all that they picked up from what he had said was that he was going to die in Jerusalem. Yun lang. And their immediate reaction is, teka, kung mawawala siya, who will be the successor? Aba, yun na kagad ang preoccupation nila. And that, that issue got them busy arguing with one another as to who was most deserving of the position among them. Sino bang karapat-dapat sa posisyon? I think this is the bigger obstacle to understanding. It is actually worse than hesitancy or fear of asking questions. And alam nyo, this applies particularly to all of us, lalo na ngayong age of digital technology. There are too many things that distract our attention. Masyado nang sanay ang tao sa mag-multitasking. And ewan ko lang kung totoong nagagawa natin lahat ng sabay-sabay. Parang yun ang pinapaniwala sa atin ngayon in the age of digital technology. Don't worry, you can do everything. Pwede kang mag-aral at mag-Facebook at makinig ng music at manood ng sine all at the same time. Really? They make us believe all of that. Kaya tignan niyo ang cellphone niyo. Ang dami niyang function. Nagbabasa ka, biglang may notifications kung ano-ano. Biglang lulundag ka sa email, lulundag ka sa messenger, lulundag ka sa Facebook, lulundag ka sa Viber. It's very distracting, di ba? Well, we often do not even have time anymore to pay close attention, to focus, to listen carefully, to concentrate, and to try to understand. Our minds can also be blocked by the many other pieces of information that we got that can develop into biases, prejudices, unquestioned presuppositions, such that we are prevented from understanding. Parang may interpretasyon na kagad. Instead of listening to what the other is saying, you're actually listening to what you think that person is saying. Hindi posible ang dialogue sa ganyan. I find it very interesting that Jesus, or what Jesus did, when he realized where his disciples were and what they were preoccupied with and why they could not get what he was trying to explain to them. Dito ako bilib na bilib kay Jesus. Mapasensya. Pinagtiyagaan niya talaga yung mga alagad niya. Well, he knew na hindi naman talaga nila daigdig yung magbasa ng scriptures to reflect on its meaning. Dahil ang daigdig na pinagmulan nitong mga kausap niya, pangingisda. But, you know, listen to what Mark tells us Jesus did when he realized they still did not understand him. Sabi ni Mark, he interrupted the journey and he sat down. Tulad ng ginagawa niyo ngayon. Maraming beses, lakad kayo ng lakad, sakay ng sasakyan, patungo dito, patungo doon. No? Pero, mahalaga palagang umupo. He sat down. And then he also called his disciples to sit down with him. Settle down. And then, what did he do? He took a child and placed the child in the midst. Itong eksena na to reminds me of that part in the famous book by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It's, sabi nila, one of the most translated books in the world, aside from the Bible, of course. The book, The Little Prince. I used to think that that was a book for kids, till I realized it's really for adults. And in the book, The Little Prince says, the problem with grown-ups is they often convince themselves that they are preoccupied with matters of consequence. Maraming pinagkakaabalahan. At pag abalang-abala ka na at aburidong-aburido ka na, you forget the more important things. It's like things are of the same worth. Distracted. When people no longer have time to sit down and to watch the sunset or to pay attention to a rose, to smell a flower, or to befriend a fox. Then people begin to go around like headless chickens in business suits. Gusto ko yung image na yon. Magandang imaginein ang isang eksena sa New York or sa Tokyo. Busy people running around, entering the metro, in business suits pero walang ulo, like headless chickens. Perhaps, this is one of the positive effects of the pandemic on all of us. Itong pandemya, binigyan tayo ng panahon to sit down. And I know, when you sit down and you don't know what to do, you get bored. Pero sa totoo lang, if we learn to reflect, there is so much to do in sitting down. This has given us more time to sit down and reflect. Pero please, sit down and reflect, pero itapon mo muna yung cellphone na yan. You will never be able to sit down really and reflect kung nakatanikala ang cellphone na yan sa atin. Mananatili tayong aburido. It takes a lot of childlikeness to be able to grow in wisdom. To understand the world better, we need to retain our curiosity, our inquisitiveness about the world. We need to dare to ask questions, but we need to pay attention. Pay close attention. We need time to go into solitude in order to reflect. We need time to pray. Pray about the things that are happening around us. We need that spiritual disposition of holy innocence to be able to allow God to guide us, to lead us by the hand like a little child.